watching the Forefront Church video podcast. And wherever you're at viewing online, we just want to say thank you and welcome. And one of the ways that we can help connect with you is we want to hear from you and where you're at and how we can help. And so head over to forefrontchurch.info after the message and click the Connect tab. It's a great way for us to help you along in your spiritual journey as you connect with God and learn about Jesus. And so sit back, relax. We hope that you're challenged and encouraged from today's message.
Surprise, it's still me. I get to do a lot today. I am really excited to be up here this morning. We are in our third week of our series, Get Over It. We've been looking at this fruit of the Spirit that the Apostle Paul talks about in his letter to the Galatians. In a visual, we've made it pretty easy for you. How do we get from this mess and darkness in our lives over this kind of fence, this decision point, into new life? And it's a pretty awesome thing. And so I want to start by reading, because this is kind of these markers of maturity in the followers of Jesus, followers of Jesus. This fruit of the Spirit. How do we manifest this stuff into our lives? So in Galatians 5:22 through 23, Paul says this: "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance," or another word for patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, and against such things there is no law. And we kind of opened things up on Easter Sunday a couple weeks ago when Jason, our lead pastor, he's the guy who normally stands up here, not me, he kind of talks us through this ultimate act of love. And that's when Jesus gave up his life on the cross to save humanity from our sin, and then rose again into new life so that we could also have new life. Amazing, amazing thing. And then last week, Dan Pollard, another one of our pastors, talked about joy. And how regardless of our circumstances and what's going on in our lives and these kind of temporary things, we can live consistently and approach the world in a positive way because of the light that's within us, and that's the Holy Spirit moving in us. And so today, this week, I get to talk about peace. And I'm really excited about it because I love peace. I know you're probably not supposed to have like a favorite virtue as a Christian. You're probably supposed to like all good things as a Christian, that you're supposed to kind of all manifest them all at once, but I love peace. It's just one of those things that I kind of have naturally gravitated towards in my life. Maybe it just feels kind of most natural to me. If you've known me for any length of time, you've probably gathered I'm a pretty mild guy. Like, I don't like conflict at all. I like to get along with people. I really kind of care a little too much about what people think about me. I hate when people are mad at me. Ask my wife. When she gives me the cold shoulder, it's a bad day for me. I don't like it. I have taken several personality tests in my life, and all of them have concluded the same thing, and that's that my primary motivation in life is peace. I just want to get along with everybody. Some people like success, some people want to move through life. That's cool. I just want everyone to like me and get along. It's cool. I literally stay awake at night sometimes thinking about peace, sometimes the lack of peace in our world, and sometimes the lack of peace in my life. It's hard. And you know, I say this, but I'm coming to you from a position this morning of really struggling with peace. This isn't something I've mastered in my life. It's a really hard thing. It's so hard to get along with people in your life. You know, on most days it feels as if our world and our culture is determined to snuff out any whiff of peace. Because we're bombarded, especially now with the internet and everything coming at us at such a fast pace, we're bombarded with stories of war, and depression, division, racism, rape, poverty, hatred, evils of all kind, all these disruptions of peace. It's overwhelming. It becomes harder and harder to silence. But I really believe that there's great hope for us still, and that's why I bother getting up and standing here and speaking today, because I believe that there's hope for us, and I believe that our peace problem, there are answers to it. And I believe that the Bible is a really big piece of that answer. I believe that the answers can be found in the Bible, and that's where we're going to be spending much of our time today. If you don't have a Bible, we encourage you to get one at the Get Connected table out in the lobby. They're free, yours to keep. You can write in them, highlight in them, do whatever you want. It's yours to keep and do it with as you please. You can also get a app on your phone if you'd rather, or you can follow along on forefrontchurch.info. We have notes actually in there today, so you can follow along with all the points and scriptures we're going to be reading today. I'm really excited about it, but first I'm going to pray for us as we get started this morning. God, we just thank you for today. We thank you for your Son. We just thank you for the great hope that we have in you, and that maybe some of the problems in our world and these things that get in the way of peace can be resolved or at least made better. I really believe that. I pray that my words this morning aren't as much mine as they are yours. Speak through me. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I'm 23, right? I'm reminded of it all the time, how young I am here. I was... And a day doesn't go by when I hear something about it, right? I was born at the tail end of 1994. The jury is out on whether I'm actually one of the youngest of the millennial generation or actually the oldest of the next generation, Generation Z. You know, we kind of use the millennial term to talk about anyone that's like under 35, but we actually have an entire new generation coming in hot right after the millennials. Be ready for them. They're coming. Probably most notably, though, I'm among one of the first to be raised with the internet. And that's a big deal. Like, that's significant. I'm convinced that had a huge role in shaping my worldview and my personality. It was huge. No other generation has experienced this before. And it's because my entire life, I have been flooded with people's opinions and information, way too much information at times. And it has shaped me in such a huge way, and a lot of my peers. And there was this kind of sentiment growing up. It was sort of a negative one. And the people older than me, some of them were fairly positive, but there was a sentiment for a long time that the world was getting worse. The world is going downhill. The world is used up. It's heading downhill, and you guys are going to have to deal with it. And it was kind of framed in this way that it was somehow my generation's fault. And I bought it for a long time. I was raised thinking that my generation was ruining the world. And not only is that view incredibly wrong and cynical, it left me feeling so hopeless about the future. It felt like I had nothing to look forward to. It was as if somebody was handing me the keys to an old broken car, and they said, you know what, here you go, we've already run this thing into the ground, it doesn't run, and we're not going to help you fix it. Good luck. We don't have to drive this thing you do. Go for it. You know, and what I really wish I had heard was, man, like, I know this thing is broken, but I've driven it for a long time, I have experience. Why don't we work together and fix it? And so that's the view I'm kind of trying to develop in my adulthood, and as I'm now raising children, I do agree. I do think this world, our sense of peace with one another is broken, or at least there's definitely some major strains upon it, but I know that we can be better, and I know that we have no choice but to get better, but it means we're going to have to work together. That means all of us, whether we're Christian or not today, whether we're old or young or somewhere in between, no matter our ethnic background, our sexual orientation, our political leaning one way or the other, our opinions, no matter what, we all have to get over ourselves if we want to see this. Our prejudices, our assumptions about one another, if we want to have peace in the world. For those of us who would say that we're Christians today, if we claim to follow Jesus, I want us all to hear this verse together, because I really think this is kind of our map towards peace in a better world. And if you're not a Christian this morning, I understand that you might not be totally on board with what I'm saying today. Maybe you don't know if you believe in God. Maybe you know you don't believe in God. But I really do hope you hear the heart behind what's being said today, because I believe that there really is hope for us, and that maybe all of us can work together to mend what is broken and come to a better place. This is Romans 12, 9 through 18. It says, "Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil and cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of a low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." Man, What I'm hearing here is kind of a depth of relationship. There's this definite emphasis on relationship. Honor one another. Practice hospitality. This kind of collective rejoicing and mourning, like Chris shared with his young friend. You know, I'm going to mourn with you. I want to go through this with you. Laying down pride, sharing in community with people of all walks of life. There's a certain depth of relationship here. This is not a shallow kind of hanging out. These people, you can tell he wants people to care for one another. That we should be a community working towards a shared experience in life. Not one of isolation, but one that we share together. So what I'm not hearing at all in this verse is kind of this sense of I gotta learn how to say that word. Individualism, there we go, and isolation. Because I think these are two defining causes of our peace problem today. These are cancers for community. Individualism is kind of this toxic lifestyle that we've adopted, and it's propped up by pride, selfishness, personal ambition, lack of care for community. It disorients us in the bigger picture of life and causes us to lose our place in the world and in the community around us. And this is perhaps one of the most tragic things facing our world. We're so focused on ourselves, so focused on what we want going on in our lives, that we just forget how much we need each other, that God created us to live and move together and not on our own. The writer in Proverbs, in the Bible, the book of wisdom, he kind of warns us of this. He says simply, where there is strife, there is pride. But wisdom is found in those who take advice. Where there is strife, there is pride. Based on this, I would conclude that peace and pride cannot exist in the same space. Let's start there. They are mutually exclusive. You cannot have both. You cannot emphasize pride in your life. You cannot hold on to these things in your life that you identify with and expect to have peace with those around you as well. Because pride says, my way is the best. I found it. I have arrived. I don't need to hear other perspectives. I don't need to hear what other people think. I've figured it out, and others just need to submit to what I'm doing and what I'm thinking. But where there is strife, there is pride. And I would say peace is kind of the opposite of this. See, peace is the choice to emphasize relationships over being right. Peace requires the humility to accept the possibility, the likelihood that we might be wrong, that we might be able to learn something valuable from other people. It requires us to be teachable and to be willing to hear opinions and views that are different from our own. It requires us to be okay with being uncomfortable. The problem, though, is that evidence sort of suggests the other way around, that we don't like being comfortable and we like to be right. We kind of like to get the last word. I had the chance to hear this next. I'm going to quote somebody, Brene Brown. I got the chance to hear her speak a couple months ago. Man, she was great. She wrote a book called Braving the Wilderness. As soon as I heard her speak, I was at a conference in Atlanta. I bought the book, and it's required reading. Like, if you're struggling with kind of the situation going on in the world, if you log on Facebook and are constantly frustrated, like, read this book. It's great. It's called Braving the Wilderness, and here's what she says. She says, we have geographically, politically, and even spiritually sorted ourselves into like-minded groups, and even in which we silence dissent and grow more extreme in our thinking and consume only facts that support our own beliefs, making it even easier to ignore evidence that our positions are wrong. Man, that's so true. We seem to gravitate towards people that are like us. We like to hang out with people that share our opinions, that do the same things as us, that watch the same TV shows as us, and read the same books as us, and hang out in the same coffee shops as us. We like to just kind of hang out with carbon copies of us. And we've retreated into these groups that are so small that we've made community almost impossible unless something changes. We're quickly creating a society in which we refuse to hear one another. And if we don't like what someone else is saying, there's somewhere else where we can go find some other thing we agree with. And if we want to, almost without thinking about it, we can create a world where we just mimic what we're already believing and hearing in the books we read, in the news channels that we watch, the ads that we see online, believe it or not, reflect you and what you think. And it's just this giant sounding board that we're living in of our own opinions. And unlike any other time in history, we can pretty much silence anything that is in disagreement with us. And this is dangerous. We need each other. And we need people to tell us when we're wrong. We need perspective. We need the opposite of what we're living in. We need people that are bold enough to check us when we're wrong. See, many of us have become prideful in our belief that we're right, that our perspective on life is somehow the most enlightened, or that somehow we've figured it out. But that way of living life, that our way of living life is not only better than everyone else's, but sometimes it's the only way that we're going to tolerate. But remind you, peace and pride cannot exist in the same space. They just can't. It's time that we start listening to one another, embracing our differences, so that we might learn from one another. Peace is not about agreeing with each other, because if we're waiting for that, it might never happen. It's about listening to one another. And it requires us to be proactive in building relationships with people who are different than us. It takes intentionality. I really believe there is great value in diversifying your circle of influence. We need people who of varying ages and worldviews, cultures, subcultures, ethnic backgrounds, people that disagree with us politically, socially, all over the map. We need people that are different than us. And thank goodness there are people that are different than us. I'm so thankful that there's people that are different than me, because if everyone was like me, nothing would ever get done. We'd just all be hanging out, chilling all the time. I love being the youngest person on staff here. Perfect example. I'm the youngest by quite a good stretch, actually. I think the next oldest person is 16 years older than me. And the rest are quite a bit older than that. They're not here today, so I can say what I want. I can say what I want. It's great. But I joke on them, but I love them, and I love the role that they play in my life. You see, if everyone on staff was 20 years old, it would be problematic. Like I said, nothing would be getting done. I need to be challenged. I need to be in an environment where there are people older than me that can tell me when I've done a crappy job on something or whatever. I am sharpened by their influence and their experience. And thank God there are people in my life that are different than me and that have a different perspective that can speak into my life in an awesome way. And I'm not sure if I've purposely chosen this. Like, it's not just here. My entire life, I feel like I've been forced to work above my skill level. I was always the youngest in school. I was always kind of the youngest wherever I went. And so I was always kind of forced to work outside of what it seems like I could do. And on any given day, I would say I'm rarely the wisest person in the room. And that's a goal that all of us can have. Be in the room where you're not the smartest and wisest person in the room. It's an amazing thing. So here's the rub, right? So maybe you're with me so far. Like, maybe you accept, okay, so we need each other, right? We need people who are different than us. We need to develop relationships with people who are different than us. Cool. But here's the thing. How do we maintain genuine friendships with people with whom we have fundamental differences? Maybe there's someone you think, man, I can't be friends with this person because fill in the blank. How do we get there? How do we get to peace with that person? Well, that's a great question. And right now we're not doing so great. And as of now, I'd say there's kind of these two dominating approaches in culture. And you're not going to find these in a book anywhere. I made these up, but I really believe them to be true. All right, the first one is what I would call the aggressive approach. All right, and we've all seen this one. Almost always it's plastered on Facebook or some other unruly place in the internet, all right? This aggressive approach basically goes like this. You have your opinion, and I have mine, and we're going to argue about it until we're blue in the face and everyone's mad. That's what happens, all right? And the worst part about it is it just makes the two parties that are arguing angry. It makes everyone watching annoyed, and at the end of the day, no one has changed their opinion. It's just a big brawl for no reason. So we know that the aggressive approach does not work. We still see people doing it, but it doesn't work. All right, so then we kind of opt for the much more civilized, polite approach. And this is the classic, you have your opinion and I have my opinion, and we're just going to agree to disagree. Now that one sounds good. I think a lot of us have adopted this, and this is becoming very common. But it is problematic. This is kind of like we'll all stay in our corners, we'll all stay out of each other's way, but at best it's a bandage over a very deep wound. It's just sort of covering the symptoms but not addressing the problem. This approach does work, sort of. It does silence the anger. You're not going to see as many arguments. You're not going to hear as many people fighting. But then everyone sort of just is silent. No one's really talking about what's important to them. We're kind of all building resentment with one another. We're all kind of assuming that everyone else is probably against us because we're not talking and we're not addressing the things in our life that are important. And so everyone's just sort of like backing away and staying in their own corners, afraid to talk about their true feelings and the things that are important in their life. And this isn't quite peace either. So is there a third approach, you might ask? Where am I going with this? Well, yes, there is a third approach. So how do we talk about what's important and still be friends? And the hard answer is that it's going to take some work, and this is what I call the humble approach. You have your opinion, and I have mine, and maybe that's okay. And maybe we could still be friends, and maybe we can learn from each other. I think Ephesians 4, verse 2 puts this idea really well. It says, be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. And I like that. Humble, gentle, patient, love, are these qualities that you would say you're exhibiting in your life? This is tough because it means that we're going to have to be vulnerable. And it means we're going to have to put ourselves out there and be honest. And it means we're going to have to listen a lot. We're going to have to listen and not speak as much, but listen to other people. And right now, we don't really live in a listening culture. We like to be heard. We like to have the last word. We like to get our point in. But this kind of creates a weird, odd, kind of backwards society. Because, you see, I think now we're living in a time when our opinions precede us. People know more about what we think, and they don't know us. And I think there was a time when our opinions did not precede us. You know, I told you I was kind of raised during the rise of the internet, right? And so, man, that ruined opinions for everybody. And it completely changed how the majority of us communicate. Thanks to Facebook mostly, many of us know way too much about people we barely know. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, I may have only spoken to this Facebook friend once or twice. Maybe I run into them a couple times a year at this conference I go to. But I know everything about them because I follow them online. I know their opinions. I know who they voted for. I know their stance on every major issue. I know how they raise their kids. I know all of this stuff about them and their life and what kind of person I think they are, but I don't know them. Have I ever sat down and had coffee with this person, for goodness sake? And this is likely the basis of our opinions for way too many people. We fail to hear people's stories because all we know are their opinions. So I would say this is why we don't lead with our opinions. We lead with a relationship. One principle I've lived with for some time is this. I really believe this, that everyone has a backstory. It seems simple enough. And what I mean by that is basically that everyone has a voice that deserves to be heard. Everyone has stuff going on in their life that we don't know about that shapes and goes into why they have the opinions they have and why they live their lives the way they do. Now, I understand there's a danger to this. I don't want to use this as an excuse for everybody's bad behavior and wrong opinions, all right? It's not a cover-all solution, but I think it should give us some pause when we're tempted to rip somebody apart in an argument, when we're tempted to veer away from peace with other people. And it's important to ask yourself some questions before you get into it with somebody. Before you kind of rip into an argument with somebody, I think a good place to start is, do you know this person? Do you know them well? Or are they a stranger or a friend of a friend or someone you kind of have seen before that you're making assumptions about? And then, if you do know them, do you have the kind of relationship where you should be speaking with them about whatever it is you're disagreeing with? Do you have enough personal clout with this person? Are you in a position to hold them accountable? Or are you just being a jerk? And are you speaking? And then again, check your motivation. Are you speaking out of love and care for this person? Do you genuinely wish this person well? And is that why you're talking to them? Are you just speaking out of frustration and anger? Are you just trying to prove your point? Check your motivations. And I would say if you don't have good, valid, quality answers to all of these questions, don't do it. Don't even do it. Don't even think about it. We don't lead with our opinions. We lead with a relationship. Because see, what we often find is that our assumptions about people are wrong. Or at least they're wrong enough to not say the thing that we originally planned on saying to them. We need to hear people's stories first. See, we're more apt to tolerate or even embrace others who are different from us when we have a relationship with them first. It helps to know somebody's story. Then we hear how that shapes their opinions. Because when we know somebody's story, we develop compassion for them. When we have compassion for someone, we are more forgiving of their opinions and their flaws, and it kills assumptions. I'm going to reference Brené Brown again. Her book was that good, I'm telling you, required reading. It's great. I have a copy in my desk. You're welcome to borrow it anytime. Brené Brown, she conducted a study on belonging. All right, and so she asked dozens of people the same question from all different demographics, backgrounds, ages, all that. She asked these people, now what's your sense of society? Do you feel like you have a community? How do you feel like you fit in the world around you? Is society for or against you? Kind of this idea, how do you feel like you fit in the world? And here's what she says about belonging and assumptions. She said, the women and men I interviewed who had the strongest sense of true belonging stayed zoomed in. They didn't ignore what was happening in the world, nor did they stop advocating for their beliefs. They did, however, commit to assessing their lives and forming their opinions of people based on their actual in-person experiences. And they worked against the trap that most of us have fallen into, that I can hate large groups of strangers because the members of those groups who I happen to know and like are the rare exceptions. Wow, how many times do we do this? All right, even in just one day, I've probably caught myself. I was thinking about it this week, trying to catch myself when I say, oh man, I can't stand people who fill in the blank. This political party is ruining the country. Everyone who voted for this, they all are terrible people. I could never be friends with them. People who fill in the blank are the worst. And then what happens? Awkwardly, someone pipes up and says, well, isn't Fred that kind of person? Didn't he do that? And you're like, yeah, but I'm sorry if your name's Fred. I'm just using a common name. But then he's like, well, yeah, Fred's cool. I mean, he helped me that one time. He gave me a ride when my car broke down. Fred's cool. I know he's probably different than all the other ones, And I would say, is Fred different? Maybe all the other people in that group are just like Fred. You just don't know them, or more awkwardly, the person says, well, wait, I'm one of those people. Do you think I'm a jerk? And then they're like, oh, well, no. I like you. You're cool. Why do we do this? Because we know them. We have taken the time to develop a relationship with this person first. We know the quality of their character. We know that they're the kind of person that would give you a ride if your car breaks down. We know that they're cool. They're good people, right? And so now we're willing to overlook or even accept their opinions that you dislike because you like them and you know their story first. When we embrace this principle of story first, it's going to change the world. I really believe it. This is when we're going to see Republicans having coffee with Democrats or independents or whoever because they find out, hey, we have something else meaningful to talk about. And maybe this is just one facet of life. And we agree. Maybe they find out, hey, we both have kids. That's really cool. Let's talk about that. This is when older people are going to invite that couple in their 20s or 30s over for dinner and hang out with them and pour into them and share stories with them because they're like, wow, I really want to invest in the younger generation instead of putting them on blast on Facebook. And that's when young people are going to say, man, old people are great. They're really cool. I can learn from them. They're not lame. They're not whatever. This is how peace happens in the world. We need to hear stories. We need to hear lots of stories before we ever dive into the facets of opinions. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. We need each other. We really, really do. And there's something that binds us together more than any other label or group could, more than any other thing that we identify with. This is so important. Peace is the choice to emphasize relationships over being right. Back in 2012, Yale graduate and Boston native Marina Keegan wrote a collection of essays called The Opposite of Loneliness. What a great title. She was 22 years old, and this opening piece that I'm about to read, it was written just days before she actually died in a car crash. She graduated from Yale, and a week later died in a car crash. But she had written all these essays, and after her death, the Boston Globe picked it up and published one of these pieces, and then the rest of them quickly found their way to print. It became really popular that year. And I remember in college, it was about 2013, I was walking through a bookstore, and I just saw this book on the shelf, and I just loved the title. It just gripped me right from the opposite of loneliness. Man, that sounds like something I want. So I picked it up, and I got to the first page, flipped open the first page, and here's what this first excerpt reads. We don't have a word for the opposite of loneliness, but if we did, I could say that's what I want in life. It's not quite love, and it's not quite community. It's just this feeling that there are people, an abundance of people who are in this together, who are on your team. When the check is paid and you stay at the table, when it's 4 a.m. and no one goes to bed. That's the kind of depth of relationship we need to have, especially in the church. Some of the most awesome moments at small group is when you look at the watch and it's like, man, we were supposed to quit an hour ago and there's still people talking and diving into stories. If you're in a small group, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you're not, join a small group. It's great. This is the kind of depth of relationship we need in the church. I don't know if Marina Keegan went to church or if she called herself a Christian, but I would say she had a pretty good grip on community and peace and the value of hearing stories first and opinions later, and rejecting this trap of individualism and isolation, and moving towards a life lived with others in close proximity. I think now more than ever, the church needs to embrace this opposite of loneliness. It starts with listening to each other, regardless of whether or not we agree, because we all have a story. We're all deeply loved by God, and we're designed for community. See, peace is the choice to emphasize relationships over being right. Why don't you pray with me?
Thanks for tuning in to the Forefront Church video podcast. Our hope and prayer is that this has left you encouraged and challenged you in your faith. And you might have some questions and some ways that you want to figure this out, and we want to help with that. Head over to forefrontchurch.info, and there's a couple different ways that you can connect. Click the Connect tab and let us know how we can be praying for you, or a staff member can be contacting you this week. Maybe you have just been encouraged by this and want to support the ministry here at Forefront Church. You can click the Giving tab, as well as other tabs that are in there to help you along in your journey with God. And so we're thankful for you. Thanks for tuning in, and we cannot wait to see you again here online on the video podcast. We love you, and we'll see you then.